Good afternoon, Professor Meyrowitz. I want to pose you some questions. Do you see evolution or conflicts between mass media and the world of digital networks?
I think it's a natural evolution and that it continues this trend toward the expansion of what people in one place know about people in other places and about the connections among places. And I think today we have a sense that people everywhere, anywhere, have some shared sense of knowledge. They share a lot of information about the world. They share a lot of knowledge about each other. They share a lot of knowledge of how people in other places view them and how they view the places that they're in. If you look at the evolution of communication over time, until the beginning of the electronic era, the trend was to separate what different types of people knew about each other and compared to each other. So you had increasing segregation from oral societies in terms of what children of different ages knew about adults and what they knew about each other, of a few years older, a few years younger. You had a segregation of the male spheres from the female spheres. You had a segregation of authority from the average people in society. And television and radio started to break that down. They started to give everybody similar types of information about each other and compared to each other. Digital is another way of processing information, and I think it's a tremendous enhancement of what we see in electronic media, and that the way information is coded and decoded allows for rapid sharing, copying and pasting, and so you have an incredible acceleration of what the earlier analog media allowed you to do. But it's not a real reversal for the average citizens. It's a reversal for many of the institutions that have been invested economically, politically, commercially in a certain technology, and so they're kind of like, how do we keep up with this? But I think for the average public, it's a very natural extension of the electronic era and of sharing information, of spreading it rapidly around the world, accessing it wherever you are. So it's an interesting change that's very disruptive for sort of the powers that be, but I think very natural for average citizens.
Do you agree with the position of Manuel Castells about a brand new model of society, the network society? Do you think there is a continuity or a disruption between the world of mass media and the world of digital media?
I think Castells is correct that the network is actually a very old, as he argues, very old form of interaction based on local families and the way people work together with friends and so forth. And what he says, and I think is correct, is that, and what's dramatically interesting is that this network form of organization is facilitated and enhanced by digital media, and now it becomes the form in which businesses and academic work and all kinds of things are organized. But again, I think that if you look over the eras of forms of communication over history, it's continuing what I described in No Sense of Place as kind of returning us to kind of oral forms of interaction, which are multi-directional, less hierarchical.
In the era of digital media and mobile communication, places are becoming more and more important. Some authors like Gordon and de Souza and Silva speak about net localities. Do you agree with them when they say that location matters in a digital world?
Right. We always have had place as a basic foundational aspect of human interaction, but there are paradoxes in this notion of location awareness, in that increasingly the access to that information of where people are is available to people in other places. And so you actually, in this the more you focus often on asking things like the first thing people do on a mobile phone conversation is often say, where are you? Mm-hmm. But the more people need to ask that question, the more it's actually evidence of the decline of the significance of location, because things that are really foundational and fixed are not spoken about. It's when you try to articulate the importance of where people are, it means that there's been an undermining of the significance of where people are. And if you look at the features that shaped people's identities in an early era, which were very place-based, children could be sent to their room as a form of punishment, of excommunication from interaction. But if a child's room now has a mobile phone and a television and a computer, the children often instead of saying, "Oh no, don't send me to my room," run to the room. They're happier to be there than to be forced to interact with adults at the dinner table. So that sort of is a metaphor for many changes that have happened to everybody in society, where women can be isolated at home with raising children, and yet they're connected to all those spheres of the culture that for several centuries, at least in middle and upper class parts of society, men would tell them, "Don't worry your pretty little head about business, about sports, about war, these are in politics. These are things that are men's sphere." Well, women at home have access, sometimes even more access if they're not working, to those spheres of the culture that were traditionally male spheres, and also average citizens, no matter where they are, have access to all kinds of images and knowledge of the activities of leaders, which are usually private and separate, and that was what made them seem so special and isolated, whether it was a religious leader like the Pope or the Prime Minister. Now, so regardless of where you are now, the features that shape the boundaries of your experience are more tied to the access to digital media than to the particular location you're in.
Do you think that television, even in the form of web TV, is still the dominant medium?
I still think television is the dominant medium. You see televisions everywhere. It's pervasive in people's houses. Unlike other forms of media, which require a lot of work, you have to find the information, you have to produce the information, process. Television is kind of like a constant companion for many people in our current era, where it's always there feeding you information about things happening in other places and with other people. Now, television, of course, is a very controlled medium, at least commercial television, in terms of what we get to see and what we don't, and a lot of it is tied to, ultimately, to wanting us to buy products and to foster certain political ideologies and so forth. But it does, in many ways, expand people's experiences beyond their locality and make them aware of other people in other places. And also, television is like even if it's not an accurate mirror of the world, it's something that so many people share, and they know about particular things that have happened in various places, that it's almost it's not as if you're keeping your finger on the pulse of everything happening around the world through television, but you are keeping your finger on the pulse that everybody else is keeping their finger on. So I think that television ultimately is a progressive force and encourages people to use all the new forms of media to represent themselves the way they want to be represented, and they use that information to expand their horizons and I hope ultimately expand the quality of life on the planet and for a more peaceful coexistence with other people in other places.
What are the main changes that have occurred in the last 20 years in the way media influence social relations?
Well, I think what's happened is television at first had generally very propagandistic information, very stereotypical roles of people of different categories, the way women were shown, the way children were shown, the way people of other countries were shown. But because television, unlike books, was addressed to all these categories of people together, that television actually was a force for people demanding changes in real life. And then television in the last 20 years, in what I call the content loop, has started to change its content to reflect the changes in behavior in real life that television, even in its early stereotypical form, encouraged. That it has pushed forward many changes in the perception of the other genders, and of political leaders, and of children's awareness of things that we used to restrict from them. And so now the children on TV are more adult-like. The adults are less authoritarian because kids know too much about them in real life, and men and women are more blurring of the gender roles, and political leaders you see on TV now try to speak more informally and like they're average people, just as average citizens now have more of a knowledge of things going on in the world. So the real life changes are now being increasingly reflected, still in somewhat limited ways, but still increasingly reflected in television content, and then that pushes the changes even further. So you have kind of a cycle of change in the direction that television itself, even in its early form, promoted.